No Coward Soul by Josephine Saxton. Originally published in the September 1982 issue of Interzone magazine, republished in a collection of the author's stories called The Power of Time in 1985, then in a German anthology in 1993 and a reissue of The Power of Time in 2011. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. No Coward Soul. I'm standing in the center of a howling desert storm, metallic grains tearing as if to strip me to the bone. I can find little air to breathe, and that is full of poisonous gases. My lungs burn, my senses turn in on themselves like struck snakes, whipping back at me for subjecting them to such awful terrors. But I am on a quest, and shall persist in the face of everything. I'm stronger than I have ever been. My powers of concentration and my determination will carry me through. I come here seeking powers that no human being has yet had, and I must not fail. Like a knight in ancient times, I must run the gauntlet. I must be fearless. If only my limbs would behave properly, they thrust themselves against my control, grotesquely, so that I laugh. It must be the atmosphere in this dreadful land, this frightful country, on the deserted planet of Amygdalania. Everything here is designed to trap the traveler. I'm deceived by strange visions, tortured by horrible thirst and hungers, by sexual desires which I feel will drive me insane, but which sweep away as suddenly as they took me, leaving me mercifully drained and as dry as an old, dying woman. I go forward, dragging myself through the tempest, wary of the ground which has hidden quicksands, unseen steps, rocks which seem to move into my path as if with intent to trip me, hurt me. Everything here is hostile. Everything is against my plan, but I shall win. Nadine prepares everything very carefully, as she has trained herself to do. The room is entirely sterile. In the corner is an ozone ionizer quietly aiding continual purification. This entire project is a work of art. The carefully placed automatic film cameras will record every stage, for she wishes to exhibit the process as well as the result. She has written notes of all her intentions. It is only a matter of checking and double-checking, taking everything a step at a time. She has taken the appropriate light hypnotic drugs. Her hair is very short and washed with alcohol. She has administered local anesthetic. The mirrors are all in place so that she can see exactly what she is doing. Magnifying glasses are to hand, and the carefully tailored arm rests are covered in sterilized cloths. She lowers herself into the specially constructed couch, placing her head on the molded pad. She's an expert with fiberglass and resin and made the couch herself. All the instruments are sharp. The telephone is silenced. The door is locked. So now, Nadine, you can begin, she says aloud. She takes a scalpel and with great care makes an incision in the image in the mirror. It is the top of her own head. When the flaps are laid back, all neatly clipped and the area cleared of blood, she takes a tiny circular saw, adapted from a dentist's drill, and cuts a large area out of her skull, lifting the object, which resembles something found on a beach, and laying it in a steel dish. The look of it amuses her. The only discomfort so far was the noise of the saw, which she hates. The whining sets her teeth on edge, but that is over. As she takes the first fine probe from the stepped-down electrical rack, she has to calm herself. It is very exciting. This is the culmination of 3 years of secret work. Autosurgery is not unknown in the world of art, but this will be the most sophisticated project to date. She has spent a lot of time practicing and researching, picking up knowledge from medical friends, reading and performing similar operations on dogs and cats. She knows the process by heart. There are important differences between animal brains and her own, but basically everything is the same, and she is perfectly familiar with human models. First of all, it is a matter of bypassing certain areas of this delightful gray matter to reach a deeply seated spot. There were figures approaching. This was to be the first confrontation. "Say who you are," a loud voice demanded. She prepared to present herself with dignity. A lot would depend on what she said and how she did it, but someone else spoke in different accents. "What the bloody hell are you doing here?" The voice was very cultured, very angry, and also someone else. "You stupid twat, coming down here at night. You've bleeding well asked for it." Somebody leaped at her and gave her a clout on the arm with something heavy, and she squealed, all dignity forgotten, anger surging in response. "I am Nadine Quilling, an artist, and I am here seeking peace." Her mouth filled with sand out of the gale. The attacker grabbed her clothing, and the pain in her arm was excruciating. "I'll bleeding well do for you. Got any cash?" "No, nothing." She was pushing backwards and fell over a sharp rock, managed to roll onto hands and knees. Fear got her by the skin, hairs rising like pins. Was this how it should be? Where was the rational discussion? "Get to your feet, woman, immediately, and explain yourself." She did so, to face a man in tweeds with a bristly mustache. He carried a shotgun. His face was scarlet with fury. The storm dropped somewhat, and she spat out sand. "If you trespass on my land, you will be shot as like as not. I don't tolerate poachers. I don't call the police. I act. You'd best be off or you might get a blast up the behind. What are you doing here?" "I'm on a mission. I seek peace." "Bloody caunchy, I suppose. No patience with 'em." The man did not seem to be aware of the others poaching on his land. The youth with the weapon was doing a kind of war dance, laughing to himself. "She seeks peace. Tee-hee, she seeks peace." He was painted in an extraordinary manner, his face a canvas, his skull almost shaved and dyed with some lettering which she could not decipher. The third person was more menacing. He had an unhealthy, spotted complexion and mean eyes like a furtive rat. His clothes were poor, everything greasy and worn. He looked cold and underfed. "No money. Them with no money pays somehow." He moved his hand and brought to life a flick knife, which he gestured with in a sly, gentle manner. It made the blood run cold. The three were obviously not together, but they were all against her. "Somebody like you shouldn't be out here at night. It's dangerous for those that don't belong." Suddenly the painted youth went for her, but she was faster than he was and grabbed the thing in his hand, a heavy kosh. All peace missions forgotten, she swung at him at the same time as aiming a kick at the shotgun, which went off with a dreadful sound, mingling with the screams of the man with the knife, who got the full blast. The youth went down with a grunt, and she turned to the tweedy squire, but he was running away. Things were not going at all well, but at least she was whole and safe. Notes on my autosurgery by Nadine Quilling. I have always had a violent nature. All my life I've been the victim of a terrible temper. I once almost killed my little sister. It was only the timely intervention of an adult which saved me from putting a kitchen meat knife, an instrument of surgical sharpness, through her throat because she had once more stolen my teddy bear. School was fraught with fights. Teenage saw me, an intelligent girl who could pass exams easily, wandering the streets of the city with a knife and a gang of acolytes, looking for trouble. I'm told that when I was a baby I screamed almost all my waking hours, bit my mother's nipples and then the teats off feeding bottles. I was always loved in spite of everything. I was a wanted child, and my violence was not bred in a soup of Freudian deprivation or parental error. And they had wanted a girl. I've always been abnormally strong, able to win fights with boys, and later able to beat any man at Indian wrestling. All I had to do to win was to unleash in myself my ungovernable rage and direct it into my arm. The sheer fact of existence fills me with fury. It is as if I was born full of resentment and rage at being in this world. I should have been born somewhere else, more suited to my talents, which, in spite of the flowering of my intellectuality, resulting in being recognized as unusually clever, does not make me feel at home on earth. My destiny is not fulfilled. I have never felt that. So, I'm going to alter this state of affairs. Earth is where I am and will be, and I'm fully tired of losing friends with my evil moods. Many things have already been tried, of course. I have been to psychiatrists and neurosurgeons ever since I was little. My parents refused to allow me to have brain surgery because they feared the crude methods might turn me into a vegetable. They were correct, but the answer still lies in brain surgery. That is why I have devoted recent years to learning everything necessary about manipulation of the human brain. I am an artist, as is well known, but painting ceased to give me satisfaction, as did fiberglass sculpture. I have worked in performance art, and this new project is very much a result of those years I spent doing quite extraordinary things in front of people in art galleries. Now I intend to solve the central problem of my own life. Rather than trust myself to a brain surgeon, I myself will effect the radical change in temperament needed to make my life peaceful, without altering in any way my intelligence, perception of the world, or motor functions. More than one piece of autosurgery has been successfully carried out, although some have unfortunately been obliged to call for medical help due to exhaustion. This operation will be painless, and I do not anticipate fatigue. There will be no problems with main arteries. Success will lie with skill and delicacy. Having located my own amygdala, which is the seat of the disturbance, I shall implant permanent pathways to that and to nearby areas so that I can self-administer appropriate chemicals to the exact brain area needed whenever I feel slightly irritated, which is often the prelude to a fit of rage. I shall never again be out of self-control. I hope that this process will become recognized as a valid tool to people similarly afflicted, to violent souls of all kinds who wield terror over others, to anyone who destroys the peace of the world by unleashing the powers of darkness which reside deep within their natures, whether they're by natural accident or unfortunate distortion. I intend to benefit people instead of being remembered as one who ruined her own and others' lives because she could not keep her temper. Everything is prepared. See notes on procedure. I have no fear. She had several chemicals prepared in readiness. No one substance was a panacea. It would require experience to know which to introduce at any one time. There was the monthly cycle, occasional illness, and medicines to be taken into account. Deep in the hypothalamus, many chemicals have many effects. Any interference must be as precise as possible, unlike the offerings of the chemotherapists she had encountered over the years. She had steroids, hormones, cannabinol, cannabichrome, adrenochrome, ergotamine, delt-1 form tetrahydrocannabinol, suprareserpine, norepinephrine, psilocin, and her own invention, her own serotonin invert. It had hitherto been thought that serotonin was not after all a useful psychotherapic tool, but she had not been convinced from her reading. She had extracted her own serotonin and distorted its indole structure to resemble that of lysergic acid derivatives. The scar on her belly showed where she had opened herself to take the necessary samples from the bowel lining, and with the help of a biochemist, a dear friend who had no idea what she was actually engaged in, had mimicked this precisely and could produce it in the lab next door, which had once been a kitchen. The only advantage of possibly getting someone else to do what she required was that a qualified brain surgeon would not be as excited as she was during actual operation. She could not be too tranquilized. Her advantage was that strength of character goes hand in hand, paradoxically, with a vile temper. Her rage could tear the world apart, and she was making it construct a new world. Everything would be okay, said an optimist deep within that part of her which she now probed with a fine, erect, sterile wire. It rained, and all the world was mud. The mud smelled of death and effluence, of petrol and shit and lead. She wore dark green Wellington boots and a sou'wester hat, and in between, nothing. What could logic do in such a world? You would get wet eventually anyway. Trudging after her mother in the snow it had been like this, the boots sticking in the green slime and clay beneath the perfect whiteness. Not far to go now, lovey. Soon to be at school. Put your feet where I put mine, or you may fall into a bog. This field is full of bogs under the snow. Out there, though, in the countryside, the snow was never blotched by specks of soot. Lifting high the infant legs, in the end, the warmth of the schoolhouse full of enemies, now to be faced, her mother gone to work, leaving her small and precious, intelligent, very bad-tempered girl in the hands of ignorant teachers and children who would laugh at the fur-lined hood her mother had sewed and call her Eskimo Nell. On and on now, through the terrible humors of this planet, where the weather was never good, was always dull and wet and cold and wretched. Oh, to be in England! Now November's here. Everything looks like a sea of diarrhea. Even earthworms could not thrive in this cold stuff, and they will survive almost anything. Planting daffodils, she had often marveled at the lively worms turning in their graves, indignant at being disturbed to make way for a bulb which would also survive the ghastly winter and thrust forth beauty and laughter enough to delight a crowd of Wordsworths whose hearts would lift at the sight of those glorious sex organs. But now it was serious, and she was alone. No mother to guide and cheer, and it didn't look much like anything at all had been planted. But, as in fairy tales and horror stories, there was a light on the horizon. Was it a house, a palace, or a will-o'-the-wisp come to lure her to her death in the bubbling morass beneath the outer shell of the planet? There was only one way to find out. A wind whipped up, full of gall and ire, blowing the rain of sulphur from far hills fit to rot a frozen mammoth. But this was important work. Her legs must carry her towards the lights. It seemed to take an age, the knees weakening, the fingers long since dropped off with cold for all she knew, and hunger and thirst driving her mad to the point where she thought perhaps, like Scarlet, she might go with the wind and eat the very earth. Rhett and Ashley were nowhere to be seen when real trouble was brewing. Her senses were not deprived, therefore she need not have been looking inward so much, deep into the sea of associations, not always as free as some literary critics will have it, but the outer world was so bloody awful there was nothing for it but to be inward as well as go on, like Milligoon to Christmas backwards, or the light. It would have been perfectly possible to forget what world she was out to change, so awful was the world she was in. But deep in her mind it was there, the ideal, the idea, the id, the drive onwards to the light and salvation. The light was in an office block in a car park with no cars, but the door opened as she approached it, much as doors in hillsides open to those in fairy tales, or those with heavy shopping bags in department stores. A secretary in a nylon overall waited. "Do you have an appointment?" That phrase, how many desperate supplicants has it put off forever? How many, at the end of their tethers, have simply stepped backwards and knotted the tether into a noose for their own necks? "Yes," she lied. "Well, if you'll go into the waiting room, I'll ask the chief to see you in a moment." On the waiting room wall, the posters. A skull smoking a cigarette, a reminder to have her cervix checked, a warning about toxicaria. But who eats dog shit anyway? A holiday poster for spectacular trips across the Great Central Commissure, complete with arranged simulated brain damage so that presumably one would not be able to read any more boring posters. The magazines on the table. Country Life, Vogue, Punch. Instruction on how to go walking in the country dressed in a side-slit scarlet dress with high sequined shoes, feathers in the hair, and punch somebody, possibly an unsuspecting pig. And then the cross of Jesus on a handout advertising Western meditation, which would change the world, person by person. Relaxation was the key to eliminating all warfare. Jesus, with his coterie of thugs around him, instructing them how to spread the message so that all future generations would be able to torture and maim and kill in his name. The only one among them with any wit or foresight, Judas, and his girlfriend Mary of ill repute turned from a healthy woman into a foot fetishist. If he comes again, it will be different. She herself would personally attend to him. She, Mary Amygdala, would personally duff him up for all the pain and trouble and misery. "The chief will see you now," said the secretary who had glided in on the thick pile carpet. With no word, she followed, dripping evil-smelling mud, and then stood there in front of the vast and dignified desk covered in the hide of an unfortunate animal. She faced a pair of gleaming spectacles which did not quite hide perverted intelligence shooting forth like sun rays at her disreputable appearance. "Have a seat." She resisted easily the temptation to pick up the seat and bash him with it, sat on it, squelching bare bum, and the interview began. She gathered together her confidence. "I understand that you are applying for a passport and a license for agriculture?" "You understand correctly." There would be no point in revealing negative emotion. It would get her nowhere. But the sight of that face was making adrenaline build up from underneath, making a stagnant sewer in weak conduits. The fury of ages was in her. In front of her, its cause. All in one package. A manifestation of what fucked up the world. A white, clean, bespectacled, masculine, self-assured, unscrupulous, self-controlled, reasonable, rational, patronizing, helpful, fatherly, brotherly, friendly, efficient, trained, qualified, educated, powerful, potent, virile, moneyed, God-fearing, authoritative, secure, polite, and democratic male. He must be democratic, or she would not be here at all. "Well, let's begin at the beginning," he said, relaxing visibly, the bristles on his face taking a slightly downward curve. She looked with her telescopic and microscopic eyes and saw his pores open and exude micrograms of sweat containing bacteria, ethers, and esters from whiskey, urea, and aftershave. "No, that's too far back. Let's begin now." The whiskers made an arc in space, which would have delighted Einstein, but nothing else showed. "Well, put it to me then in more detail. What do you require of this office?" He was being patient. "I wish to have free access to the hypothalamic and amygdalanian territories, and after soil improvement, grow new crops, guaranteed disease-free. You must be aware that it will cost you millions, and that there are strict laws governing what is grown here. Yes, but I am prepared to pay a large price, and you would gain in other areas also. Would we, though? Our ecology is already very carefully balanced. I noticed that outside, she said with sarcasm, and then as he reddened slightly, she told him what she planned to grow. Hybrids of cannabis sativa, peyote, various medicinal plants, and also in underground caverns with sunray and infrared, anticipating his pointing out that the weather here was too stormy and cold for such crops. I see. With glasses like those he should have been able to see, but he clearly did not, quite. And how soon would you wish to commence work? It was funny how some things commenced and others began. I wish to commence immediately. I see. There was a nasty ashtray on the desk, carved by some sad hand driven to torture alabaster. She saw it slowly lift itself and slowly work its way through his cranium, shattering slow blood over the room, and this vision warmed her while she waited. Well, if you will just return to the waiting room, I shall run a few things through the computer, and then we can discuss it further. We cannot promise anything. Of course not, she said, knowing that it would always be true. Out in the waiting room, she deliberately chose another chair to mark with an arse print. There was a mirror. She got up and went to check her appearance. The top of her head was open, the scalp laid back like turf, clipped short and neat, ready to lay down on a prepared surface. There were wires sticking out of the gray brain, a smudge of blood on her forehead. No pockets, no handkerchief, so she wiped off the blood with spittle as best she could. She sat on yet another chair, but she was dried out now, except for her own humors, damply steaming on even the grimmest day. She was summoned again. Well, I've checked a few facts and figures, and there certainly seems no need to terminate the application at this point. It will go before the board next Thursday, and we will let you know of their decision by mail. But that's no good. I need to know now. I've got everything ready. It is a matter of life and death. My dear lady, it is not a matter of life and death. I'm afraid there is no other way. We have to be democratic about these things. We can't have just any old project going through without a vote, and we cannot rush these things. She thought of attempting to bribe him with promised cash, but he had another idea. Of course, if you would like to discuss it further, here and now, he said in a different tone of voice, looking at her breasts. He turned round to a drinks tray behind him. Then she picked up the alabaster monster and hit him with it hard. She stormed out, past the open-mouthed secretary, determined to go ahead with the project anyway. So, it was illegal. Anarchy was the reply. Outside it was still raining, and there were no other buildings. It is at such moments that anger changes into despair. There had been a lot of anger, so there was a lot of despair. Slumping along in her wellies, she cried bitter, desperate tears. When they got into the schoolyard at playtime, the other children ganged up on her, pulling her ringlets. Outnumbered, she ran to the labs to hide and found frightful things written behind the door. Outside in the yard, under the shelter, were cages of baby white mice. Everybody got to look at them except her. She wished it would be tea time so that she could go home. Then the bell rang, and she opened her eyes, aware of her sterilized room, the alarm set to go off every 10 minutes as an aid in case of unconsciousness. Not infallible, but it had worked now. It was wonderful the way nothing hurt at all. In a superstitious corner of her mind, she had not quite believed that brain tissue does not itself feel. She steadied herself and selected a cannula, very gently worked it down into the tissue until the point made contact where an electrode had been. The matter closed around it as if welcoming the foreign object. The cannula was obtained through a biologist, a size used for goats. She had told him that she was doing a life-size sculpture of a brain operation on a goat, a perfectly possible thing for her to be engaged in. The top was adjustable so that she could have it exactly right, hardly protruding through her skull when replaced. She had not known how thick it would be, but judged correctly that it had been quite thick from the number of knocks it had taken during fights without cracking. 2 more cannulae went in without trouble. It was now a matter of testing to see if they were correctly placed, although she already felt sure. But she did not want to be the victim of perpetual appetites, or to feel continually hot or cold, or have her judgment and senses distorted in any way. A few millimeters and she might not be able to read or to smell certain things, but she reminded herself to concentrate now and not digress upon morbid possibilities. A human brain is not like an animal brain precisely, and doubtless human brains were individuals also, just like faces and hands. She only knew this one, and it was the first meeting. Suddenly, the weather cleared, and she was in a burning desert. A beach, not a desert. There were few people about at this time of day, but no mad dogs. A sailor with his trousers rolled up and his peaked hat awry. The Greeks were friendly and good-tempered, the men much too friendly but pleasant. Nearby, a tethered goat munched on kitchen scraps, its golden eyes blank with greed. The sailor came and sat down beside her, jogging her paintbrush, ruining the sketch she was making. "Hey, steady on! Look what you've done!" He looked, but obviously could not tell there was anything amiss. He put his arm round her in a strong grip, hurting her bare arm, and put his other hand on her breast, which was clad only in a tiny bikini top. This was so unexpected and unusual. All the Greeks she had met spent a lot of time chatting and being charming. He tried to kiss her. "Get off, you bastard! What the hell do you think you're doing?" In any language, the message was plain, from both of them. He had no smile, no charm, not a typical Greek, but horribly handsome, and knew it. She started to struggle, but he persisted, murmuring the one word, "Fuck." "Oh, sod off, you pig," she said, and got her strength together, heaving him off as she stood up so that he rolled in the sand. Perhaps he was drunk, again unusual for a Greek. He was on his feet again and instantly at her, but she got her ankle behind his to bring him down. He was very strong, but now she was furious and crashed her fist into his teeth, making him howl and bring his hands up. Her other fist went into his eye and her knee into his balls, bending him double as she sprang back. She grabbed her sketching box and hit him on the back of the head with it, flinging tubes of paint everywhere. He fell groaning, then silent. She spent a lot of time getting back the paints, except one which the goat had eaten, packed everything, and watched the sailor getting to his feet, bending over again to vomit. He gave her a venomous glare and shook his fist, but she shook hers with more determination. He staggered off, and she went in search of some lunch. Thank heavens she had her strength. The world was not always safe for women. She lay back, sweating profusely on the sterile sheet. The sun, the effort, the doubt. What would have happened if she had not been able to zap him? It was not possible to think about it. Saliva came into the mouth with revulsion. She remembered now. She had given the ruined sketch to the goat. So a little more work and the worst of this project would be finished. She took careful measurements, deciding to bore the holes now while she was still steady. A high-speed drill can rip through anything and needs great care. Little jokes about holes in the head flitted through her mind as she finished the job. Then the electrodes again, the fine probe. Just testing. She suddenly felt the blissful, orgasmic waves passing entirely through her, a wonderful feeling of pleasure, but had the presence of mind to switch off the current. It must be like that for deep-sea divers. The symptoms of euphoria were so pleasant that she might not wish to surface. Already she was tempted to switch on again. No wonder animals would starve to death rather than stop pressing the buttons. She pressed her own and was instantly flooded with a feeling of happiness, physical sensations so agreeable that it must surely be the way flesh was meant to feel. She switched off, trembling. She took a while to calm down, administered more local anesthetic and a mild tranquilizer, and set to work again. Another probe. Veners, the lizard lord, stood before her, snarling to show his terrible teeth, his immense and splendid ruffles standing up to impress and intimidate. His claws were terrible, and his anger great. She had trespassed into the innermost secrets of the keep, and she must die.
"So, you call yourself a seeker?"
he hissed, his tongue slithering to manage her language.
"You come to spy on us from Earth. You will not be the last to have been disposed of here on Amygdalania, O bride of death. What say you?"
"Oh, shut up, Veners, you oversized newt. I've telegraphed the contents of the scrolls to my colleagues. You might try anything, but you can't spoil the project now. We now know that you've been stealing precious metals from the lands of Maruzi and Magoon. We have you, Venors. What are you going to do?" For answer, he extended his claws and lashed out at her, but she was quick and lithe and dodged expertly, meanwhile drawing her sword. As she swung it around her head, she felt its power flow through her arms like electricity. Her shoulders flexed. She took her stance, and as the creature darted forward, she hacked off one front leg with a mighty sweep. A frightful roaring filled the cavern like thunder in the hippocampal deeps, but still he advanced, eyes red with rage, green blood spouting out of the precious tapestries which he had plundered from the weavers of Heschel's Gyrus. She thrust with the sword deep into his rumbling breast, needing all her strength, the strength of conviction, through the armor plating and into the beating heart as evil and black as his plans. He, who had tried to destroy her world, was now dying.
"Earthwoman, thou hast done for me,"
he groaned, blood dripping out of his mouth.
"But tell me this, how will you now return to Earth? My minions have destroyed your ship. Did you think we were complete fools?"
She sprang back, pulling out the sword, which smoked with his acrid humors, and ran for the door, down the 1,000 steps of his tower and out into the perpetual twilight of Amygdalania. The gray plain stretched before her, the only relief her wrecked ship. She thrust her sword into its scabbard and put up her hands in supplication. "Oh, Board of Medical Directors, how will you help me now?" "The thing is," she thought lazily, cleaning her instruments with alcohol, "I need the angst to get me out of scraps. But would I get into the scraps in the first place if it wasn't for the angst? There were always outside circumstances which would excite anyone to ire and wrath, but those who were mild and turned the other cheek, did they get raped, beat up, slaughtered? Well, of course they did." She placed a drop of cannabinol down the central cannula. Instant trip, thoughts going on several levels, delight and distortion and mystery and humor, great fun, and not a bit of aggro anywhere. When it was over, she lay dreamily smiling, thinking, well, it works just fine. Amazing. But she was lazy. She just wanted to lie there, existing, taking pleasure in being around. She took a look in the mirror at the exposed brain and found it hilarious. She laughed and giggled, feeling the lovely humor rise up from her diaphragm in waves, the funniest brain she had ever seen. A person could live like this, just laughing at their own brain. There was a loud knocking on the door of her apartment. Instant alert. Who was it? Go away. Keeping quiet, wishing them away. Eventually it stopped. They had assumed she was out, had not heard her laughing, she hoped. Last stage of the operation, placing the skull with its holes over the ducts. Perfect fit. Then the scalp. Stitches. Antiseptic. Shot of penicillin. Adjustment of drip feed to include high ascorbic acid. Her brain cleared of the last molecules of cannabinol, and she felt fine. If it wasn't for the oxygen cylinder, she would have liked to smoke. The cannula ducts were obvious, but she would wear a hat until her hair grew again. Resting, she waited until she felt quite certain she would not feel ill upon getting up, and slowly sat up. When the dizziness had gone, she began putting things in order, had a whiff of oxygen, and went to make a cup of ginseng tea. She washed her face. Everything was fine. She hoped that the films were good. About 3 days convalescence, probably, taking it easy. Quiet and sleep. And then there would be the matter of obtaining horticultural sun lamps, good manure and fresh seeds, and a clean water supply down there in the caves. Whole tracts of amygdalania were wasteland. She would make them blossom. The alarm bell rang, so she went to disconnect it. There was the important matter of getting Venor's minions on her side to assist with repairing her ship. She would be their leader now. Venors was dead. The phone rang as soon as she plugged it in. "Hello? Nadine? Your phone's been out of order. I've been trying to get you for days." "Hello? Who is that? This is Mary Amygdala speaking." "Nadine, quit joking. There's a party tonight in Elsie's studio. Can you come?" "You've got the wrong number. This is Mary Amygdala, you creeping Jesus." She slammed the phone so hard that the plastic cracked, and she picked it up and crashed it against the wall, knocking a pickled cat's brain off a shelf. She was about to start screaming when she remembered. No need. The cannulas dripped a small dose of her own special serotonin and was instantly in a different frame of mind. She must have been suffering from post-operative shock. She cleaned up the mess but felt slightly weak, so went to sit by the window, pulling the cord on the blinds. The view outside was of a dismal November afternoon, with rain and gusts of wind blowing garbage around. It was enough to depress the spirits, but she wasn't going to get upset. Perhaps the weather would improve by the time she had finished her convalescence. The afternoon mail arrived, and she noticed that there had been other mail. She opened the most ominous one, which was disguised as an electricity bill, but she could decipher the strange script. It was a declaration from the minions of Venors of their sworn enmity, and a refusal under any circumstances to help her. She went to sit by the window once more. Tears ran down her face. Not tears of anger, but the tears of the timid and ineffectual. Only rarely as a child had she ever felt like this. Perhaps she would never be able to return to Earth. Perhaps they would stop her crop-growing scheme. If she went out, perhaps she would be attacked by louts. There must be ways of dealing with situations without force, but they were alien to her. Surely, though, she had taken the right course. One thing was certain, nothing in her world would ever be the same again. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.